When I head to the U.S. for our continued coverage of the 2024 U.S. election, voters in the U.S. hamlet of Dixville Notch launched Election Day in the first minutes of Tuesday with a tied vote, mirroring the incredibly close national polls in the White House race. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump each got 3 ballots in the tiny community in the northeastern state of New Hampshire, which for decades has kicked off Election Day at the stroke of midnight Monday, and hours before the rest of the country's polling stations open. Democratic Vice President, Republican ex-Vice President have been battling in a tense and exceptionally close race, with opinion polls largely tied. So a gathered crowd of journalists, the vote opened with a rendition of the U.S. national anthem performed on an accordion. In the meantime, polling stations have opened in the highly anticipated U.S. presidential election, with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump neck and neck in the polls. The historic election could make Harris the first female president, while a Trump win would mark a remarkable comeback. The outcome is far from certain, with millions of voters expected to cast their ballots today. The result may take several days to finalize, adding to the tension in this deeply divided nation. The world watches anxiously, knowing the outcome will have far-reaching implications for global conflicts, climate change, and more. And for more on this, we're joined by 2 gentlemen, Mukesh Kapila, author and global health humanitarian human rights development, as well as Temsankwa Zoe, international media and political risk consultant. Gentlemen, glad to have you both join me on the news.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be there.
Okay, let me start with Zoe. We understand from the first ballot cast, Trump as well as Harry are neck and neck in polls. I mean, what could be the reason for this?
Well, one of the reasons is that there's always a margin of error. When you look at how all these different groups or pollsters, as you call them, collect their data. The other reason could be there are some people or communities that react or respond differently. So if you are part of a sample, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to say how you are going to vote. So there's always that margin of error. In reality, what we do as journalists, probably when we analyze this kind of data, is to be able to say the result or the outcome is uncertain. It could swing probably one way. You could have probably former President Trump winning by a wide margin, or you could have Vice President Harris winning by a wide margin too. It is just an indication that it is too tough to call. There are too many variables within the margin of error, but these swing states, as we call them, could go either way. But there are also different ways or paths, what is called paths to the 270. It is always more difficult for the Democrats to get there than it is for the Republican because of the number of states that and maybe votes that are not being contested in real terms in what we call safe seats.
Well, Zoe, let me just hold your thoughts now. Let me find out, from our other guests regarding what he thinks about polls so far being neck and neck for Donald Trump as well as Kamala Harris.
Well, I think it reflects the fragmented nature of the United States. In fact, the word United States is a bit of a misnomer, and in that the states are by no means united. And this so-called national election is really a set of local elections and local issues, which are obviously different in different states and for people of different demographics. So what we have is a lot of local elections going on, which are coming together as a so-called national presidential election. And I think it reflects the division and polarity and diversity of the United States.
Let me come to you, Zoe. Looking at, the New York Post endorsements of Trump, do you think that can influence voter behavior?
It is difficult to say. I mean, these are probably, this is one of those rare elections in the U.S. when you talk about the federal elections. But also just to acknowledge the other speaker, in that, you know, when you get this ballot paper in the U.S., it's a very long one. It might take maybe even up to 10 minutes to fill it in. It is not just the presidential election or the candidates that you have to look at. It's all other set of elections that you are having to consider. So in a way, former President Trump was in power. People do remember how it was, how life was under him, you know, relations with international, you know, partners and enemies, but also how the economy was, how he handled COVID and all that. And also under the Democrats, under you know, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, people are also, you know, having the privilege of having to compare whether what life is now is what they want to continue, or they might want to go back. So, you know, it is very, very difficult to say how the different groups will react, you know, or respond. You know, if you are coming from the ethnic minority, you know, communities, how do you respond to the issues of immigration? If you are youths or if you are women, but there is some evidence that there are a lot of women who are voting for Kamala Harris on issues of, you know, the right to decide what should happen with their own bodies. But also there are other people on the economy who say that former President Trump used to run a better economy from a policy point of view than what's happening now. Dashi?
Connect with Afua. Gentlemen, will come to you in a moment. Afua, bring us up to speed. What's happened where you are? What's been the turnout so far?
Well, I'm at this polling station in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in downtown Washington, D.C. And as you can see behind me, it is very busy. Lots of people turning out to vote. And it's only 9:15 here in Washington, D.C. Already a very, very busy scene. I'm going to take you around the polling station. As you can see, you have these voting booths at the back here. You can also see there's lots of press as well that are here to observe the election process. And around here is where you have the voting booths where people will write their ballot. On here you have your instructions for voting. You have notice of any candidate withdrawals here. All your instructions here are for voting. And yes, as you can see behind me, it is extremely busy. We have a queue that almost goes out of the door here, and this queue actually has only built up since we have been here. When we arrived here maybe about 15 minutes ago, the queue was not that long. So I think as the day progresses, you see the queue is going right around this main hall in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library here in downtown Washington, D.C. It is certainly a very, very, very busy scene this morning. Now, polls opened at 7 a.m. and they will close at 8 p.m. this evening. If you are in the queue to vote whilst polls close, you can still vote. So yeah, a very busy scene.
Afua, just describe the mood you sense from the people there. Describe to us the demography of the people there, you know, who have come to cast their votes.
Well, it is a very, very mixed scene, actually. Now, Washington, D.C. is 44% black people, but at the moment, as you can see from the queue behind me, it is a very mixed scene. Lots of women, lots of men, lots of people of a different demographic coming in to vote. And when we got here as well, there was lots of people dropping their mail-in ballots as well. You can still do mail-in ballots. There was a box for that outside, so people doing that also. But as you can see, a really, really mixed scene. Lots of different people coming here to vote and making sure that their vote counts, making sure that they can cast their ballots in a peaceful way. And it's a very peaceful scene. It's quite a sort of a festival scene. You've got election workers outside who are really, really super helpful for everyone here. And I think everyone here is quite relaxed. But like you said, in terms of demographics, it's a very mixed scene at the moment.
Well, how would you describe what you have sensed so far? Do you sense voter apathy? What are people saying behind the scene regarding who should emerge as the winner of this election?
Well, this is the thing, because you have so many polls beforehand, that can affect how people feel about voting. They may feel that, well, okay, my vote doesn't count if it's already been decided. But because the polls are so tight, I think that people are really feeling that, yes, actually, my vote can make a difference. Like I said, when we got here, maybe about 30 minutes ago, this queue wasn't here at all. And I think this queue is a real testament to the fact that actually people feel that, you know what, we are going to go and cast our vote. This is probably the most consequential election that the US has had in modern history. It's the tightest race since the year 2000 as well, and I think that that is really reflected in the amount of people that you are seeing turning out to vote. Like I said, people are very relaxed, people seem very happy, very calm in the queue. Washington DC was a city yesterday that seemed to be battening down the hatches somewhat, but today it actually feels much more relaxed than it did yesterday. Like I said, a huge line of people, I'm surprised by it, that have come out to vote that weren't here 30 minutes ago. So I think this particular polling station, the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, is going to be a very busy scene all day today.
I feel like they say, let's hear from the horse's mouth. If possible, can we speak to one or two persons right there about how they feel about Election Day today?
Okay, now the rules are that you cannot speak to anybody who is queuing up to vote inside the polling station. They have very clear rules about that. So once they're outside, we can speak to them, but once they're in the queue inside the polling station, we're not allowed to speak to them. But later on, we will speak to people who are exiting, who have the I have voted stickers, to get their opinions and to get their feelings on how they feel about voting on election day.
Well, before I let you go, Afua, by way of just comparing back home here in Nigeria, when we have elections, I want to find out what's the presence of security officers like right there as people queue up to cast their votes.
And that's a really good question. So when we came in earlier on, there was a presence of police outside, but they were more there just to kind of oversee. They weren't really interacting with anybody. It was about 6 police officers, but they're just sort of there to keep the peace. While we're in the polling station, there's a lot of polling officials just here to sort of help people to vote, point them in the right direction. So there is a security presence. It's not too heavy, but like I said, there is quite a relaxed atmosphere. But we are in downtown Washington DC here, somewhere in the capital that is quite protected. But yes, some police presence outside, some security officials and voting officials inside the polling station as well. Not too heavy a security presence, and like I said, it is quite relaxed in the atmosphere.
Afua, thank you, but please still stay with us. We'll come to you in just a moment. Let's, speak to our guest further regarding how things are taking shape as regards to the U.S. election. Let me come to you, Mukesh. We've seen, polls so far where Trump and Harry are neck to neck. What demographic factors should be examined, for instance, in this poll result to help us understand, level of support for either Trump or Harris?
I think from what we can gather from the numerous polls that have taken place is that there is a divide, and there is a gender divide. It seems that more women are voting for Kamala Harris, and it seems that the traditional black vote for the Democrats is being eroded by Trump. It seems that Trump possibly has an edge in relation to working class votes. And it seems that he has more of an edge in the deindustrialized or the rural areas. And so there is a clear difference in terms of class, economic status, and gender. in terms of the tendency of the voters around the United States. And the question then is, how do these numbers add up in relation to the collective in the individual states, which will then decide how the electoral college votes are allocated?
Mukesh, just, hold your thoughts, please. Let me get back to our correspondents bringing us, up-to-date, feed regarding how this, election is turning out. Afua, how soon, as we wait with bated breath, people want to know how soon should results, be rolled out?
And that is the question. Pardon me, that is the question on everybody's lips, isn't it? How soon should we expect to see a result? Polls close around 8 p.m. this evening. And after that, that's when the count begins. And we just don't have any idea of when we will get these results. It could be into Wednesday morning. It could be into Wednesday evening. Now, the factors that affect that are your mail-in ballots. In 2020, there was a lot more mail-in ballots because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that meant lots of people mailed in their votes rather than coming to stand in line. We've have had a lot of early voting as well, about 80 million early votes cast already. So we're anticipating potentially we might have a result tomorrow morning. But let's also remember, because the figures and the numbers have been so tight, you might have some states and some places where they are going to have to do recounts. And of course, recounts take time. So from sources I have spoken to over the past couple of days, we are anticipating that we will get a result Wednesday into Thursday. But like I said, this is an election that has had a raft of surprises all throughout. Nothing has been predictable whatsoever. So I'm saying it could be Wednesday into Thursday, but let's see what happens over the next 24 to 48 hours.
And of course, we'll keep in touch with you, Afua Hagan, our Chief International Correspondent. Afua, many thanks indeed for your detailed coverage. Let me return to you, Mukesh. We have seen, unique time of voting in places like Dixville Notch at midnight. Do you think this early voting would influence or impact voter turnout as well as engagement?
It's good if the voter turnout is good, because these being highly consequential elections for the whole world, not just America, every vote counts. But with so many tens of millions of votes already cast, as your correspondent was saying, I think what happens today is only one part of the overall story in terms of the expression of the will of the American people. And that's why I think this is a fascinating case where it's difficult to judge which way we are going to turn. Because many people have already cast their votes, even while the two candidates were going along with their hustings. It's clear, without listening to either of the candidates, they'd already made up their minds at a very early stage. And this is how people make up their minds. They don't necessarily listen to the candidates. They decide based on their own experiences, their own emotions, their own backgrounds, their own whatever they're feeling. And this is one of the aspects of democracies which I think researchers find very difficult. How do people make up their minds? Why do they make up their minds in a particular way? And in America, you have all the contradiction paradoxes that you would expect in any democracy, all coming together in even greater numbers.
How about you, Zoe? Your final thoughts regarding whoever emerges the winner of this election?
So whoever emerges has to deal with the wars that are going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Whoever emerges has to contend with the domination of China in the global marketplace. Whoever emerges has to have a policy towards Africa, which is predominantly beginning to say, well, they want to hold on to their resources and have a fair share. Whoever emerges has to unite America. But it is going to be very, very difficult, because it appears that within the last few years, the Democrats and the Republicans have been further and further away from each other. And it also then depends on the credibility of the various election officials in the different states, if there are challenges, if there are legal processes that have to be undertaken to ascertain the results. It's going to be very, very difficult to show that leadership between now and the 20th of January.
Well, thank you so much, Thamsakwa Zoe, international media and political risk consultant, as well as Mukesh Kapila, author and global health, humanitarian, human rights development. Many thanks indeed, gentlemen.
Thank you.